This program is brought to you by SoundsTrue.com. At SoundsTrue.com, you can find hundreds of downloadable audio learning programs, plus books, music, videos, and online courses and events. At SoundsTrue.com, we think of ourselves as a trusted partner on the spiritual journey, offering diverse, in-depth, and life-changing wisdom. SoundsTrue.com. Many voices, one journey. You're listening to Insights at the Edge. Today my guest is Claude Poncelet, and this is part 2 of our conversation on the spiritual dimension of reality. Claude Poncelet is a physicist specializing in nuclear physics, astrophysics, and cosmology, who taught at the university level. Claude is involved in many environmental initiatives and served as Chief Staff Liaison on President Clinton's Council on Sustainable Development. He has taught shamanism in Europe and North America for more than 25 years, along with his wife, Noelle. With Sounds True, Claude has written a new book called The Shaman Within, a physicist's guide to the deeper dimensions of your life, the universe, and everything. In The Shaman Within, Claude invites the reader to discover the 21st century evolution of shamanic practice, one that will delight, empower, and open the eyes to new dimensions of our strange and marvelous universe. In this episode of Insights at the Edge, Claude and I spoke about bringing shamanic practice into one's professional life and how organizations have a spirit and how we can journey to be informed by that spirit if we wish. We also talked about the spiritual dimension of the cosmos and a journey Claude took to the black hole at the center of our galaxy. Finally, we talked about impeccability in shamanic practice and Claude's view that impeccability is something to aspire to, not just in the shamanic journey, but in every aspect of our waking life. Here's my conversation, part 2, on the spiritual dimension of reality with Claude Poncelet. First of all, Claude, I'm just so happy to have this chance to record with you the promised part 2 of our conversation on the Shaman Within. So I'm glad that the stars...
I'm really happy to be here with you, Tami.
The stars have aligned and we get to do this, so it's wonderful. Now, the second half of your book, The Shaman Within, is about shamanism in the 21st century. And I'm curious to know, how do you feel shamanism as a path is inherently different now in the contemporary world than it was as it was practiced thousands of years ago? What's inherently different now, or what needs to be different now?
Yeah, I think the simple answer from my own experience is that what is inherently different are the practices and all the paraphernalia and rituals that accompany the practices. The fundamental principles are the same. They are unchanged. That is the presence of the sacred in everything in this world. That is the presence of spirits, the interconnectedness of everything, and the ability for us human beings, and this is, I'm sure, true for other species too, but as far as we can, the ability we have to connect with that spiritual dimension of our world and to contact spirits, to dialogue, to cooperate with them, learn, and help bring harmony between the sacred and the secular, or the material and the sacred. This is still the same as it has always been in shamanic tradition. But the way this is done in our modern world, among our technological world or built-in environment, or institutions, or commerce, or finances, or institutions of learning and medicine and whatnot, the practices need to be different. And the way we do these practices, down to the simple matters, is the way we dress, the way the instruments we utilize have to be different. They have to be adapted to the modern technological world. One could say, if you wish, that these elements, the practices, the rituals themselves, the dresses, the objects we have, this is the liturgy, if you wish, of the shamanic practice. It's always actually varied from culture to culture, and that's not the essence of shamanism. And this is true for all spiritual traditions and all religions. The liturgy is not the essence. And here the essence is the same, but the liturgy needs to be different.
I'm curious to know what some of these new practices or new liturgies, if you will, are in our 21st century that have been particularly meaningful to you.
I think one aspect which has been very meaningful to me and has been an exciting part of my learning in searching for adapting the shamanic practice to our modern world has been how to practice shamanism, that is, how to work with spirits in my professional life. And I've taught at the university. I worked on environmental protection in large corporations. I worked at the federal level, the state level with big government. And so I learned primarily with spirit guidance, how do I practice shamanism in my daily work in an office building in a big downtown skyscraper, for example, and in conference room, meeting rooms, working with technology, working with policy, and clearly, using a drum and doing shamanic journeys and using, traditional paraphernalia such as feathers or incense, which are all very important and are still important in some situations today, was not at all appropriate for those settings. And so I had to learn how to still work with spirits, or still seek their guidance for greater harmony within the work that I was doing. And many of these, and I describe some of those practices in my book on the chapter on shamanism in daily and professional life. And the practices have tended to be fairly short, fairly simple, and fairly non-intrusive, so that I could perform them, including the contact with spirit, while meeting, for example, with executives or meeting with colleagues, or in other situations that way, without that being observed as something strange that I was doing, and so these have been exciting ways and very powerful ways to still connect with spirit and to bring spirit into in this case, the work environment.
Now, Claude, I'm wondering if you can be quite specific and introduce us to one or two of these practices that could be done in a professional situation.
Yeah, let me mention one such practice, which I still practice fairly regularly, which I've called word doctoring. W-O-R-D, and which I was taught by Spirit, and it's a practice that I use in settings which could be meetings or situations or encounters with people, whatnot, whose purpose is to bring about a greater harmony to the situation in light of the welfare of the whole. That's the purpose, and what it requires on my part is I do a very short ritual, which takes about 30 seconds. I connect with the four elements of water, earth, fire, and air, and I ask spirits to give me a word, a sacred word, let me call it, that will have the power when it is expressed to bring about this harmony. And when I do that practice, and I may be in the middle of a meeting, and I can do that fairly quickly, the words come to me very quickly. It's a matter of really having a clear intention. And then I would insert that word in whatever I would be saying to the group. And a couple important things here is that this is a matter of ethics. This is an offering, because I have no right to manipulate any situation without people's permission. But I can make an offering, and the word is an offering for whoever hears it, their own spirits, if you wish. Then they have the choice to cooperate and bring about more harmony. It's an offer for them. The other aspect, which I've always enjoyed in this practice, is that the word spirits would give me very seldom had any relationship, usually it never did, any relationship to the situation at hand. So it would be sometimes very awkward and a challenge and fun, to tell you the truth, to insert it into a sentence without people noticing something strange. And I've been amazed, by the way, at the power of this practice. And again, it's not my power, or I don't get any credit for any positive results. It's all the work of spirits. My responsibility is to do the practice. That's where, if I get any credit, it's because I did remember to do the practice. But I did this practice, for example, when I served on President Clinton's Council on Sustainable Development, which was a presidential commission which met during the 8 years of his presidency under the leadership of then Vice President Al Gore. So there were CEOs from corporation, heads of environmental groups, 5 cabinet secretaries, Vice President Gore. And I would use that practice during those meetings. And the results sometimes have been just totally astounding. And it's a way of again practicing, calling spirits for guidance, for help, calling for harmony between the sacred and the secular. And so this is one example. And there are others which I describe actually in my book.
Now let's pause for one moment here on this word doctoring practice. So first of all, I want to make sure I understand it. So you call in the 4 elements and you ask to be given a word, and you could be given any word. It could be tomato, could be anything.
Correct.
And then you say the word at some point in the midst of this high-level meeting of some kind, or at any meeting. And when you say the word, it is an invitation for a higher level of harmony to manifest in the meeting. What is the role that spirit might be playing, or spirits might be playing, when this word is uttered? How do you understand what's going on here?
My understanding is that the role of the spirits there is in choosing and giving me that word. It comes from spirit, And in a way, you could say that they have endowed that word with a particular power, a power to bring forth harmony. It's a sacred word. It, by the way, resonated with me a great deal, and I liked the practice when I was taught it, because it called to mind what my Celtic ancestors, are Celtic ancestors in Europe, and the shamanic practice of my Celtic ancestors included many practices using sacred sounds or sacred words or sacred songs. And these would be used for healing, they would be used for divination or other purposes. And there are still actually, as I researched that, some ancient spiritual tradition that would use some sacred word in a healing situation, for example. And so this is, for me, this is where the spirits have come in. You know, they have given power to this word, and it is my role in cooperating with the spirits, because, as I have said before, for me, shamanic practice is a cooperation with spirits. My role was to utter that word, in my normal conversation, and that's where the cooperation came in. Does that answer your question on where spirits come in?
I'd like to hear more about the cooperation part. So you're looking to have greater harmony among a group of people. You utter this word. Now, what are the spirits doing to help this harmony come about?
Well, the spirit, first there is a spirit presence there, and this is important. I've in doing this practice, I have called upon spirits. I've called upon the spirits of the four dimensions: earth, fire, water, air, to be there. And I often, although this is not necessary for the practice, in going to a meeting, I usually would contact the spirit of the room, the spirit of the table where we're meeting, the spirit of the institution that we represent. And I call upon these spirits for their presence. So there is a presence of spirits, and one needs to call upon spirits and ask them for help. This is the way, my understanding, this is the way things work, and have an intention in asking for the guidance or the help from spirits, which is where the cooperation comes in. And that comes from my own spirit, my own soul, which is in contact with the spirits. And so the spirits are there in their, in presence, and the just their presence, this is just my guess or my intuition, but just their presence probably is initiating in some of the members there that are more open, some inner contact with their own spiritual self. I can't verify that, but I suspect that is happening. And one can feel, and I know you've had that experience, and I've asked other people, what can feel that a space has become more sacred, that there is something special about it. And I've actually, Tami, had some very interesting occurrences following some of those practices, where I've had colleagues or people in attendance coming after a meeting and telling me, Claude, I don't know why I'm saying this, but it seems to me that the meeting went so well that you did something. I don't understand, but it looked like you were doing something. No, can you tell me? No, were you doing anything, or can you tell me what you were doing? And I think that's people's own inner divine self, which is, I think, coming to the surface and connected with that spirit essence. And so when people would ask, I would always tell them, said, yes, if you're interested, I can tell you what I was doing. And people were always very interested. I actually had a boss who I loved a great deal, and I'd never told him what I was doing. And one day, and he said, Claude, you're some kind of a wizard, aren't you? And I was kind of taken aback, and I said, well, and before I could say any more thing, he said, Claude, just keep wizarding. And so I think he had felt that something was happening, what's going on.
Now, Claude, I wasn't going to bring this up, but now I feel I have to, which is when you and your wife, Noelle, visited here at Sounds True before the publication of The Shaman Within, you came up into my office, and I had the chance to briefly meet with you. And I noticed that the room was filled with light during that meeting, and that the two of you were emitting quite a bit of light. And I remember thinking, God, this is weird. These people, I've never met them before, and my eyes are all tearing up because there's so much light in the room. And I never thought to myself, I wonder if Claude's doing something. But now I need to know, were you doing something?
Well, as I remember, I think what I was doing was what I normally do in such situations. And I had, contacted the spirits of your office, and as I usually do when I do that, I honor and bless the spirit, and then ask that that our meeting has the most appropriate outcome, for the greater well-being of the whole, which is usually the way I never ask for something personal. I usually ask it that way. I know I had contacted the spirit of Sounds True, and asked, honored and blessed it, and asked for the same purpose. I know Noelle had done similar things. I had done some shape-shifting work to prepare myself to be, in the most appropriate state. And clearly, Tami, if I can say, you came in very open to spirits, because whatever light you noticed was coming from spirits. It might have come from my own divine self to your own divine self, and but that is in cooperation with all the other spirits, because it's all connected, and so that's the best explanation I can give you.
That's helpful. That's good. Now, you said something interesting, the spirit of Sounds True, the spirit of an organization. So do organizations, any organization, Starbucks, whatever, do organizations have spirits?
Oh, yes, they certainly do. Organizations are formed. They are a gathering of human beings and other objects. We often think, even in shamanic communities, that a drumming group, a drumming circle, has a spirit, the spirit of the circle. Well, it's the same for an institution. I would say that even institutions that many in the ecological or even spiritual world tend to dislike, like big oil corporations or big mining corporations. They all have a spiritual dimension. There is a spirit to these institutions. I filed my text with I'd asked for an extension because of my illness, and I worked with the spirit of the IRS.
Oh my!
What makes it difficult for us is to separate our judgments that come from our ego from the spiritual aspect of these institutions. And yet, I found it extremely helpful to work with the spirits of these organization institutions. For example, the spirits of the corporations I worked for or the university I worked for has been very, very helpful for me in making my approach to my work much more harmonious and impeccable. And then again, it's not a matter of changing the organization, it's a matter of changing me so that I can be as effective in the organization and then bring about change if change needs to be brought in. It's the same for all human beings, members of the human species. We all have a divine self, a soul, and it sometimes is difficult to accept that that major terrorists or dictators or both in history and currently had a soul, but they did. Their ego took, the way I understand, their ego took over, control of their life, and so that their spirit could not be manifested, and yet they do. And I think the contact with the spirit of organizations, particularly those organizations that we have grudges against, it's very important that we make that connections. And I've always told my students, when I told them, they're very upset in an oil company, I say, well, let's journey to the spirit of that oil company, the institution, and just honor and acknowledge it. That's it, nothing else. We just recognize, acknowledge it. And there's always a lot of resistance to that. Not only how could an organization like that have a spirit, and secondly, why would we want to do that? And I tell them that the alternative is for us to send negative, hostile energy to that institution. We have a choice. Either we honor its spirit or we send negative, hostile energy. And the second way of relating for me just adds up to the hostile, negative energy that is in the world. So we're just contributing more to that. And so I think that's a very important concept, which is not an easy one for us to accept.
No, I'm still contemplating contacting the spirit of the IRS. What was that like? How did you do that?
Well, when I do that, now I can do that fairly quickly because I've just practiced this a great deal. But I would encourage people, just with the help of a drum or whatever, or deep meditation, to go and with the intention to call upon the spirit of the IRS and to show itself. And usually it will show itself in a certain form, which is part of the message itself, as we enter the spiritual dimension and meet the spirit of that institution, of the IRS in this case. And then my advice is always first honor it, bless it, and then what I usually do is I do two things. I do this when I found my talk. I ask for guidance in doing this in the most appropriate way for the welfare of the whole. And then I ask the spirit, because filling out taxes is a difficult and sometimes challenging and not very fun thing to do, and all the numbers and a lot of paper to handle and whatnot. And I ask that doing this, I ask the spirit of the IRS to use that energy to help a special cause. And in my case, I usually I'm thinking of children, and I usually say, for children who are hungry or children without resources, can my spending this energy, could you help Spirit of the IRS that energy helped, those children in need. So there's a way of, working, again, cooperating with the Spirit for the greater good.
And if you were journeying to a company like a mining company or another company that you felt was being destructive in the world environmentally, what kind of message might you send in that case?
Well, and I have done that. Again, I would first acknowledge it and bless it and honor it, and I would ask, for example, a typical thing I might ask is, what guidance on my own behavior and approach toward that company as I would be dealing with it for the greater welfare of the whole. And I usually would approach it that way, so it would always be guidance for myself. And what's important here, Tami, to realize is that in working with the spirit of an institution, for example, let's say a mining company that we feel is destroying part of Mother Earth, does not mean that we agree with what that company is doing, or that it doesn't negate also any activism or any actions that we would take in ordinary reality to try to change that situation. In my case, it's actually helped me to be even more active and working in the ordinary reality to change things. But the Spirit will give me guidance on how to do that in the most appropriate way. And I've learned, for example, that if I do work to try to change the way a company is acting, and I come to that with a lot of judgment and hostility, I'm not going to be very effective. And so the guidance I get, leads me to a great deal of more effectiveness in my, activism, if you wish, with a company like that. I've also learned, by the way, from those spirits, and this is where they give me a different perspective when I ask them for guidance, and that is to, think about the people in that company. Am I judging them all? Who am I to judge? I can disagree with what they're doing and try to change their way of doing things, but the judging is a barrier to being effective. And so these are, reminders of, that I get from spirits when I work with them.
You're listening to Insights at the Edge, produced by Sounds True. We welcome you to learn more about our collection of more than 1,000 learning programs and receive 2 free gifts just for visiting us. Just go to SoundsTrue.com/free gifts. That's SoundsTrue.com/free gifts. And now, back to Insights at the Edge. Now, Claude, in talking about shamanism in the 21st century, in the second half of your book, The Shaman Within, there's a really interesting section on journeys to the spirits of the cosmos. And you talk about how here in this time of the Hubble telescope, when we know so much about the cosmos that we didn't necessarily know in the past, that it affords us new ways of relating to and you go into quite some detail about journeying to black holes and quasars and pulsars and supernova. And I found this section of the book so thrilling. So I really want to dig in a bit here and talk about this. Tell me a little bit how you started experimenting with journeying to these different cosmic bodies.
Cosmology, I'm a physicist, and cosmology has been a passion of mine. And over the years, I moved somewhat away from nuclear physics into astronomy and astrophysics, and then into cosmology, which is, I think, for me, the most exciting science these days, because, as you say, we know so much. And not a week goes by without a new discovery out there with one of our telescopes, either in space or on the Earth, and we're learning so much, and learning that we know so little about the cosmos. And so I had this passion as a physicist for knowing more about the cosmos, and clearly as a shamanic practitioner, I wanted to know more about the spiritual aspect of the cosmos, and so I, and here I had no outside teachers or ordinary reality teachers for this, so I really had to depend on spirits to guide me and to help me in journeying. And then I started journeying to nearby objects in the solar system, various planets and comets and asteroids and whatnot, and then went on outside other stars and then the galaxy, and then further out into all the different objects, the quasars and the pulsars and the supernovas and the black holes, as you say. And this has been a very wonderful and experience for me, one of great teaching. And I spend time in the book about this because I am so convinced that this is an essential aspect of spiritual work these days, and that is to connect with the spiritual dimension of the cosmos. There's a number of reasons for that. On the one hand, and I talk a bit about that in the book, but for millenniums, for thousands of years, probably since the evolution of the Homo sapiens, we have been very Earth-centered. Till very recently, even in our cosmology, we felt, this was about 500 years ago, that the Earth was at the center of the universe. And it's only very recently, in the past, 2-3 generations, that we have totally uprooted that understanding and realized that we are a small speck of a planet around a very ordinary star among billions of stars in a galaxy which is itself one among hundreds of billions of other galaxies, some with trillions of stars and lots of planets. And so the perspective of where we are in this universe is bound to change human consciousness and our relationship to our planet and to one another. I think this cosmos-centeredness, as opposed to Earth-centeredness, has not yet been fully absorbed, I think, by us humans, but it is coming. The science is getting to be more and more absorbed, taught to. I see my grandchildren, for example, are much more aware of their place in this universe, and I think that we need to, as that happens, to recognize also the sacred or the spiritual dimension of the cosmos. And there's various reasons for that. One, I think, as we connect not only with a picture of a galaxy or of a supernova from a telescope, but we connect with the spiritual dimension of that supernova or of that galaxy. We deepen our own spiritual journey or spiritual path. It's a very powerful connection. I find, for example, the guidance from those spirits is very different from the one I get from spirits of nature on this earth. There's something else that it's a different dimension out there. Another reason is that for me and for those that I have had the privilege to teach, it really connecting with spirits of the cosmos deepens our understanding of interconnectedness. Not only are we connected to this nature on Earth and to everything else on Earth, we really connected to the far reach of the cosmos. And of course, science has been telling us the same thing. We all come from the Big Bang. Most of the heavy atoms that are needed for life have all come from this supernova that helped create our planet and everything that's on it. And so this feeling of interconnectedness becomes so much more real. And thirdly, and this is maybe the most important, is that as we as a species go out with our technologies more and more into space, as we are doing, the moon and Mars, and maybe further out, it is so crucial that we not objectify space the way we have objectified the Earth, and then destroy the Earth, use it for our own needs, use the resource of the Earth without any regard for its well-being. We totally objectified it. And this is still going on a great deal. And, and indigenous cultures have always had a reverence for the spirit of the earth, Pachamama, Gaia, Mother Earth, and that, prevents us from destroying the mother. We need to have the same aspect towards space. And I fear that now there's a great deal going on, even some of it in science, that objectifies the cosmos, and seeing it as just another way to exploit more resources for the benefit of us humans. And I think we need to be very careful about that. And by connecting with the sacred of space, the creator of the cosmos, I think is the only way we can avoid, this overexploitation.
I'm wondering, Claude, if you could help give me a feeling for what it's like to journey to one of these cosmic bodies. You could pick another planet or a star or a supernova, take your choice, but tell me a little bit from your experience what journeying to such a cosmic body is like.
I can share, and I share some of these experiences I share in the book, but I can share one of the deepest experience as being to journey to the black hole at the center of our galaxy, and I journey often to the spirit of our galaxy. I have a great relationship. It's I feel her as a mother. I feel the galaxy is my home, and not where I live here, or not this planet even, or this solar system, but the galaxy is my home, and I feel a great deal of love from the galaxy spirit. The black hole at the center of the galaxy was a very special journey for me, and the first time I did that journey, I was actually, I was quite almost terrorized, if you wish, because I didn't know. It was like plunging into the unknown. Didn't quite know what was happening. I remember telling Noel here, this is what I'm going to do. Please, keep an eye on me.
Make sure I come back.
Yes, and so I, as I explained, these journeys are journeys in the middle world, where one journeys actually back in time, because when we are journeying in space-time to the black hole, and so I had to traverse, leave the solar system and then go by many, many stars and go toward the center of the galaxy, which is, by the way, in the constellation Sagittarius.
Can you explain, Claude, this idea that you have to go backward in time? Explain that.
Yes, the light we see from cosmic objects, including that from the sun. When we see a star, we see stars around the black holes. They're moving very quickly. That's why we know there's a black hole there. They travel at the speed of light, which is very fast. However, the distances are very large, so that our sun, for example, the light from the sun takes 8 minutes to reach us. So that when we look quickly at the sun, we see it as it was 8 minutes ago. When we see a star that is 30,000 light years away, and a light year is the distance that light takes a year to traverse, we see the star as it was 30,000 years ago. And the galaxy is hundreds of thousands of light years wide. So when we go to the black hole, it forgot the exact number, but it's 50 or 60,000 light years away. So we see it as it was 60,000 years ago, if that's the right number. And so when I go to the black hole, as I see it, I'm going back in time, as well as in space, which for physicists, in the theory of relativity of Einstein is quite common, because we're talking about space-time and traveling in space-time. And so we go back in time when we travel, when we go to a quasar that may be 12 billion light years away, and we see it now in a telescope, for example, from the Hubble telescope, we see the quasar as it was 12 billion years ago. So when we travel to it, we travel back 12 billion years in time. Does that make some sense?
It's kind of freaking me out, but I think I'm following you. Yeah.
And so, and that's what's exciting. It's really bringing physics and cosmology and shamanism together in a very exciting way. Anyhow, when I do travel to the black hole, and it's always good to take your time to get there, and I see what's around me. I see a lot of other stars and solar systems and whatnot, and get to the black hole. In my first experience there, what you get is what's called the event horizon in physics, which is the large sphere that surrounds the black hole, which is where gravity becomes infinite, so that once you reach that, there is no return. You are sucked into the black hole.
Okay, so I'm gonna have to pause you there too. When gravity becomes infinite, I noticed that.
Yeah, and again that's true at the center of the black hole, where you get an infinite point, infinite density, but at the event horizon, there is no return. Even light gets absorbed and cannot escape, which is why they're called black holes. We see objects because light reflects from them. or because they emit light, but a black hole absorbs all light, and therefore they're black. We do not see them. We know they're there because, for example, in the middle of the galaxy, there are stars moving at incredible speed in a circular motion, and we can calculate what kind of gravity is necessary to bring to make them move so fast, and that's where we know that the only thing that could produce that gravitational force at that distance is a black hole. So we know there's a black hole there. And to answer your question, it took a great deal of some call it courage, but it could be just also craziness on my part. But I had all my spirits with me. I had prepared this. I had power objects with me. I had my allies with me, power animals and whatnot, and I entered the event horizon and entered the black hole. And it's very difficult to describe the experience. I haven't had that kind of experience in any other journey, but it felt like there was no more time. I was fully in the present moment. I felt fully connected with everything, but not in any sense of feeling connectedness. I was connectedness. I was connected. It was a sense of love and compassion, which was so deep that I couldn't even put a name on it. It was just, felt incredibly, this is where I want to be. And actually what I've learned, it's not that it's difficult to come, to exit a black hole and come back. It's difficult not to stay in a black hole because we want to stay there. So when I teach this practice to students, I always have certain rituals that I have them sign a piece of paper and whatnot, where they promise to return, because it feels, this is where you want to be. You don't want to go out. It was a profound experience, and I had an intention the first time. Every time I do a journey like this, I always have an intention. Again, that's for me, that's very important. That's the cooperation we have with spirits. And going into the black hole, I remember my first intention is I want to learn something more about myself. And that was my intention. And I had a great, profound learning while I was there.
What did you learn about yourself?
Now, which I can share, by the way, because I think I do share it in the book, but the spirit of the black hole talked about truth and love and told me these are the same thing. The two words you use, but it's the same thing. And so that's been a great revelation and need for further work for me as I understood that deep truth or deep love as being one and the same thing and being in me, something I needed to manifest. So that's an example of of a very deep journey. A journey to sort of supernova is quite different. Supernova is one of the most violent phenomena in the cosmos. It's a huge amount of energy being, you could call it an explosion, a huge explosion, huge amount of energy, often resulting in the creation of a black hole and a huge expanse of matter being ejected everywhere. And I've learned a great deal by being in that. I often, in a supernova, I will merge with the spirit of, which means I become the supernova and experience that explosion and expansion. And I've learned a great deal about violence. And and the difference between the cruel type of violence that we so often see today, unfortunately, all around the planet, and the natural organic violence that exists in nature, that has a very different purpose, and that we have within ourselves, which I understood is a source of creativity when it is used in for the purpose of creativity and of transformation. And the supernova, a star will not produce any element higher than iron in the table of elements, because iron doesn't fuse into. And so all the elements that are necessary for life, the higher metals and others that are essential, magnesium and potassium and others, they're all created in this explosion of the supernova. And so the supernova, in a way, has helped create life. And so this explosion, if you will, this violence was necessary as a source of our own life and the life of every other species and on this and other planets.
Now, Claude, I have kind of a weird question for you, but as you were talking about the galaxy being your home, I thought, well, why stop at the galaxy? Let's keep going. I mean, the Earth's my home, the galaxy's my home. What about the system of galaxies, of which our galaxy is a part?
You are totally right, and you hit me right there, Tami, because I love the galaxy, and I'm realizing that I'm still being too parochial, and you said it right. My home is the universe. It's the cosmos. It's this immense cosmos. I started by thinking, well, my home is, here on this piece of the earth, and then, it's on this continent. And then I went, as I grew older and became more shamanic and environmentally conscious, as my home is the whole earth. And then as I went into cosmology, of course, realized I was limited. My home is the solar system. It's much bigger. It's this galaxy. And as you say, absolutely, that is still very parochial. There are hundreds of thousands of other, billions of other galaxies, hundreds of billions of other galaxies. And that's all our home, my home. And of course, at the peak of cosmology, physicists now are talking about other universes, what is called a multiverse, that our universe is one of a multitude of other universes. And that's become very difficult for the mind to hold. It's already difficult to hold our immense universe as our home, but maybe it's even more than that. It's mind-boggling and exciting.
Do you think it's possible?
It's possible, and it's possible, and I find it in myself and others that I've worked with who've had the same thing. It happens as a almost simple shift in our consciousness. Oh yes, this galaxy in my home, this universe is my home. And once you get there, and it becomes so obvious, and I think it becomes obvious because our soul, our spirit, has always known that. Our ego, our mind, our personality, likes to be much narrower. But once we absorb that, and our mind fully absorbs it and accepts it, it fundamentally changes our relationship to the earth and to other human beings, to other species, to the rest of the, there's no way once you have that consciousness that you're going to hurt anything on the planet Earth. It makes absolutely no sense to do that. We're this little speck, sacred little speck among this immense sacred universe, and we have to take care of it. That's our job. That's our role.
Now, Claude, have you ever attempted a journey to the whole of creation, the whole, including everything, not all the galaxies?
Yeah, there's a journey I've done and I've taught in some very advanced workshop to the spirit of the cosmos, our own universe. And it is quite a profound journey to do that. Yes, it is. It is totally possible. I mean, the whole spirit is sacred, and it has a spiritual dimension, has a spirit to it. It's a beautiful journey. My recommendation is that I think it's good to go step by step. And for people getting into this, I ask them, have you ever journeyed to spirit of the Pachamama, of Gaia? Let's start with there, the spirit of the whole earth, and then go from there. Let's go to the spirit of the sun, the spirit of the moon, of all our solar system, and ultimately of our galaxy, and then move from there ultimately to the spirit of the cosmos. But it's a beautiful journey, and it brings learnings that are very unique to the spiritual dimension of the cosmos. It has taught the things about life and death and relationships, and which are a bit different, and it's difficult to explain that, but it's a bit different than what I would learn from a tree or from a water body here, spirits of the earth. Again, there is no value judgment there. They're just different kinds of learnings. We should take advantage of it. We live in this cosmos.
Now, Claude, we're coming to the conclusion of the second part of our conversation related to your new book, The Shaman Within, a physicist's guide to the deeper dimensions of your life, the universe, and everything. And as a last question, I'd love to hear what you have to say about a word that you emphasize in The Shaman Within, impeccability, and the importance of impeccability when it comes to our life and our shamanic practice.
Yes, impeccability is a concept that both Noelle, my wife, and I have found central to our own shamanic practice and our own lives and our teaching. And impeccability is a difficult word to describe, and I make an attempt of that in the book. It is not excellence or perfection. It is really more dealing with the intention of being impeccable, that is in total harmony with everything one has around. It is, for example, in the shamanic practice, I find it is extremely important to practice and learn about impeccability in doing a shamanic journey, in doing a ritual, in contacting spirits. And what that means is really letting our own divine self, our own spirit, be fully manifested with our ego, our parts, our minds, our imagination, all that at the service of our own divine self, then that enters in contact with the spiritual dimension of other beings or other things. And this requires a great deal of practice, or mind or ego or persona. I even call one of our ego parts a shamanic ego. That is, it's an ego part that thinks it is spiritual, but it is still part of the ego. And it takes a great deal of time and practice to really reach this purity of intention and of contact and collaboration with spirits. That I call it impeccability in the shamanic practice. I've also found for myself and then in others that I could not practice impeccability in my shamanic practice if I was not also practicing impeccability in my day-to-day ordinary life. In other words, I could not separate these two. If I wanted to be impeccable in my spiritual, my shamanic practice, I needed to be impeccable in my professional work, in my family work, in the way I lived every day, in the way I drove my car, in the way I related to people. And I realized that too often I would separate these two. I would try to be, once I did my shamanic practice, to be very impeccable. And then, I would not be impeccable in a lot of my actions in my ordinary life. And I said that, we need to be impeccable in those, which means for me, for example, that even in my psychological self, I need to be impeccable. I cannot separate, for example, doing psychological work on myself, doing mental work, physical work on myself from my shamanic work. I needed to be impeccable in the way I treated my body. I needed to be impeccable in dealing with my mental health, dealing with my physical health, dealing with my the way I use my mind. And so impeccability in ordinary reality for me is essential for impeccability in non-ordinary reality, and the opposite is true. To be impeccable in ordinary reality, I needed to also learn how to be impeccable in non-ordinary reality. They're one and the same thing. And I found that very important because I think that too often we tend to separate the secular from the sacred again. And I was raised in a religion, Christian religion, and it struck me how during certain time in the church and whatnot, we needed to be very impeccable and religious, but then back home, back at work, it didn't really matter. And there was a separation there, and I still think that in our culture, particularly in the Western culture, we tend to separate, our spiritual life from our ordinary life, and for me, one needs to be impeccable in both, and that's been a strive for me. I often say that, I don't think one reaches impeccability ever. This is something that it's like democracy or sustainability. That's something you always go toward because it's not perfection. There's always a way to do that better. And I hope that by the time I reach the day of my death, that I will be at a state of as much impeccability as I can. So I think that's a daily work for me.
I love what you're saying, Claude, about impeccability in non-ordinary and ordinary reality both. And I was thinking, how is it that Claude Poncelet is such a kind, present, attentive person every time I talk to him? And now I think I have the answer. I've been talking with Claude Poncelet. This is the second part of our conversation about his new book, The Shaman Within, a physicist's guide to the deeper dimensions of your life, the universe, and everything. Claude, thank you so much again. I always love talking with you.
Thank you, Tam, and it's been a joy and a pleasure to talk with you.
SoundsTrue.com. Many voices, one journey. Thanks for listening.